in a certain way. And, if they're still going, oh no, mental health, oh, I don't believe in all that. You could say, okay, I understand you don't believe in it, but this is what I believe in. This is what I'm trying to instill here.
So, hi Edeline.
Hi Yasanthi.
Okay, so what are we talking about today?
Okay, so we're going deep into generational trauma.
Wow. Wow. Okay, actually, I know the topic already. I'm just dramatic purpose.
Actually, you know what about generational trauma? I don't know. I've not really heard about it much when I was younger, but after I became a parent, I feel like I hear about it a lot. Everything is about generational trauma, breaking the cycle. So it's only then that it got me thinking after I saw this social media post. But before this, really, it didn't even occur to me that generational trauma could be a thing that affects us. I don't know about you. How about you?
For me, actually, I always was aware of the concept of generational trauma at the back of my mind. I didn't really took the time to look into it, like what it's about or whatnot. But this podcast, the topic that we're having today, when I was doing my research and I delved into generational trauma, and I'm like,
something hits deep,
really hard. And hard because when I was looking into generational trauma story time, so initially I started off with what is generational trauma when it started.
You want to know the basics,
then from there it just went. I just thought about my grandma, my grandpa, my mom, my dad, and how the trauma has been passed down, right? So I started thinking how my grandparents are immigrants, essentially great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents. They came over from India to Malaysia and they witnessed the British occupation and the Japanese occupation. So during that time, I'm sure concepts such as anxiety, depression and stuff wouldn't have even crossed their mind. I'm sure my grandma back then, when she was witnessing the British occupation, she wouldn't have thought is my daughter depressed? No, I don't think she...
Am I feeling anxious? It would be just survival mode, right?
Yeah, survival mode. So, but then it got me thinking, because a huge part of generational trauma is something that they pass down through generations. So, my grandma witnessing the British occupation and whatnot, and where it was survival of the fittest, where you always got to survive, and she lost her mom really young. There's a thing to this story, just keep going, okay? So she lost her mom really young, so my grandma stopped schooling, and she had 7 other siblings below her. So she essentially had to step into the maternal figure, right?
Do you know at how old?
I think she was around 10, 11. She stopped going to school.
Wow.
So, and she picked up essentially and essentially becoming a mum in a way, right, for the siblings under her. But her siblings managed to go to school and whatnot.
Okay.
And her older brothers went sort of became the breadwinners, so they went out with my grandma's father and to find money for the family. So my grandma was the one sort of making sure everything is running well at home. Right. So my grandma, didn't really have the time to, rightfully so, she didn't really have time to process her emotions, I'm guessing, at that time, because, again, survival of the fittest, she got to make sure that everything is running and her siblings are alive. That was her priority, right? Then she married my grandpa, and then she had my mom, right?
Okay.
So, my mom always told me that my grandma, how the way that I'm talking to my mom right now, she could not ever speak that particular way to my grandma.
You mean the tone or the words used?
Everything.
Okay.
So my one thing that stood out from my mom was my mom always told me that even though my mom felt angry, sad, whatever, she could not verbalize it to my grandma.
Right. Did they see it as wrong or sorry?
Good question. Actually, because she wasn't brought up in an environment where showing emotions was encouraged or was there wasn't really an opening for her to do that. It's more like one way. Okay, my mom told me to do this, I need to do this, and that's what she told me now. Okay, so there were a lot of things that her mother did that she didn't like growing up, and she just kept quiet lah, because it's okay, she's my mom, she got to tell me, she tells me what to do and I got to listen.
Respect, right?
Right? So she didn't my mom wasn't used to verbalizing her feelings. Now present day setting. I am here. Right? So now I practice like talking to my mom. So I'll say things like, Mom, I don't want to talk about subject XYZ because I'm angry. Can we talk about it later? But this, for my mom, is a sign of disrespect. She will be like, how dare you talk to me like that? If I were to talk to you, if I were to talk to my mom like how you are talking to me right now, I wouldn't be alive. Ooh. That's what she would say.
Okay.
So it has got me thinking, right? Why is there that gap? Like, because I am verbalizing my boundaries, my emotions and stuff like that. Which for me, I think it's something that's good, right? Because I'm communicating. But for her generation, it's like, how dare you? You cannot talk to me like that.
You're right. And Yasanthi, I'm just curious, like you say, it's generation after generations, right? So when was it that, for you, you're like, okay, no, I need to express my feelings. I need to use words because it helps. What was that turning point for you?
Actually, I wasn't like this when I was a kid. I was sort of like my mom when I was a kid.
Okay.
I bottled up a lot. I didn't really talk about a lot of things, and I always listened to my mom. But it got to a point where I think it was those like teenage years where you're on the path to self-discovery and stuff like that. And then I exposed myself to a lot of mental health related shows and contents, and they were doing things like boundaries and whatnot, and I see how parents should be, and how healthy communication should look like and that whatnot. So I started practicing, but again, it is something like out of the norm. So it always made me wonder, like, why is there this like gap, something that's normal to me but it's seen as a sign of disrespect for her. Like my grandma didn't practice this with my mom, so my mom sort of got used to the way that my grandma is, and she used that as her frame of reference and when bringing us up, right? So when I started communicating back, she's like, oh, you're talking back. How dare you?
Okay.
Wait till your kids talk to you like that. She'll go to that kind of thing. So I was wondering, is this like a byproduct of generational trauma, trauma? Because it makes sense why my grandma, come on, that lady is just there trying to go through day to day during the British occupation. I highly doubt the concepts such as depression or anxiety would be the last thing that would cross her mind during that time, right? So like, that's something that got me thinking. Then I told you this whole topic, when I was researching, sent me into a loop. It's sort of like I'm seeing clarity, but at the same time I have even more questions, like, why is there this disconnect? And then I asked you, like, how do you raise your kids? And how do you, like, because I see the way that you practice healthy communication with your children.
At least I try my best to.
So by the way, Edeline allows her kids to express emotions. Like, you want to cry during our online meetings. If her kids are like sad or whatnot, she'll be like, you wanna cry, how are you feeling? So like, me growing up, nobody asked me that kind of questions before. So when I saw Edeline like allowing her children to feel, or to, it's just that question alone is validating enough. So I'm like, how do you do that? How do you practice it? How? I cannot brain it.
I know, right? It was pretty tough for me, actually, honestly. It does get difficult on some days as well for me. So generational trauma on my end, like I said, I think it only came about, awareness on my end when I became a parent. Like when I saw social media posts about this, cycle breakers and stuff. And then I became more aware of my environment. And then it got me thinking. So if I were to look back, no parent is perfect. I would always tell, my friends, my family, like, there's no such thing as perfect parenting. There's no such thing as one formula to good parenting. Everybody just do you, So then it got me thinking about my parents and how they parent us, me and my sisters, even my grandma, because I lived with my maternal grandma as well throughout my childhood, and actually adulthood as well. She just passed away not long ago, and so that got me thinking about how they raised us as well, and the kind of fears or the kind of feelings that I get when I do certain things. Of course, I'm not like this person who can just jump into everything. I'm also still working on myself a lot, and it really got me thinking. And honestly, my dad, what I saw, what made me realize that she was my dad, he grew up in a not a very easy childhood, you know. But honestly, I never really saw what he did and how he broke that cycle on his end when he parented my sisters and I, because it's really totally different. He's like a super loving dad, really out there, even with the grandkids now. He's like, you know, playing games with them, hide and seek, you know, making them run around. Like, you know, us parents are sitting down and he's running around with the kids.
So sweet.
So yeah, my dad didn't really have that childhood, honestly. I mean, it was very different for him. And so because of the awareness of generational trauma that I came across online, then I realized that he was a cycle breaker. He didn't pass down the things, how he was treated, or the emotions that he had to bear with from the other generations to us. Yeah, so I really respect him for that. But that being said, there's still some kind of trauma somewhere. Everybody has to admit
It just
that,
slips
you know,
through that crevices.
yeah, like even for me, I've come to terms that I will pass down some kind of trauma. Honestly, I try not to, of course, but at the same time, I think it's about being aware and knowing how to work around it. So, like for me, my mom, when my firstborn, we were at home a lot because of the MCO when he was born. My firstborn was born. So my grandma, every time he cried when he was older, like 1-ish plus, you know, toddlers being toddlers, expressing their emotions, they still don't know what's happening in their bodies. Why do I feel this way? And then they start crying, they start screaming. And then I realized my mom did one thing that got me thinking a lot. First, she said, "Shh, don't cry. Shame, shame, don't cry. Everybody will hear." I'm like, wait, what? Mom? You know, I'm like, wait a minute. How come she's reacting to it this way? You know, I was like, no, Mom, it's okay. Let him cry. He can cry. He's a child. He doesn't know his words yet. He can cry. No, I don't want the neighbors to hear. So she proceeded to close all the windows and doors. Like, I don't want the neighbors to hear. I'm like,
what were your exact feeling then?
Of course, I was like, why are you doing that? You are, first of all, it's totally against my parenting, you know. I'm trying to do something totally different, and here you are doing this. And but of course, I didn't want to start a fight or anything. And we spoke about it later on. Like, Mom, it's okay. He doesn't know how to talk yet. That's how he expresses his feelings. And thankfully, my parents are the kind that they listen as well, and they let us do us. So eventually, she got used to it. Even though sometimes she's like, "Oh my gosh, it's so noisy." But
that's like how my mom got used to me now. So quote unquote talking back. In other words, communicating,
right? Yeah. And my grandma at that time, I really don't think she meant anything bad or whatever. Not, she meant well. You know, like it's like to jaga marwah as well, you know. So she's like, "Shh, don't cry. It's shame, don't cry. Shame. It's okay. You know, you can do other things and that kind of thing." And that this kind of things really hit me. And honestly, that got me, even that thing, I mean, there were probably larger traumas that people have that's, you know, impacted them more. Like for me, I realized that this shame thing actually affected me a lot. You know, so my decisions in life, a lot of it is that fear of shame. You know, like if I were to do this, am I going to put somebody else down? If I were to make this decision, or if I were to make this leap, who is going to be affected by it? Is somebody else going to be affected by it? So I see a lot of like, how are my decisions going to affect others? The whole what if. Yeah, so like I said, you know, even though I think there's still some kind of trauma that seeps in slowly, which I really want to learn about. I want to know, first of all, how did it all come about, and you know, how can you help yourself? You know, I think what's most important is how can you help yourself. Like for me, I realized when I was a parent, and like I'm glad that you realized when, you know, you're still much younger.
I realized it during like social media, but one thing that I also struggle with is like the feeling of guilt. Because I'm also pretty much indoctrinated since I was a kid in me to like not talk back to your parents, right? Because you're always sort of told like, okay, parents are the authority figure, respect. It's like whatever parents do, just respect.
You are not always allowed correct, right?
They're always correct. You're not allowed to talk back, right? But I realized myself that as I was growing up, right, if I find something that they're doing that I don't really like, or I feel like it's like crossing my like the boundaries or whatever, I sort of tell them back like, hey, I don't like what you're doing, right? But I also I think it's sort of this indoctrination, like I would say, since I was a kid. It's like there's like a dissonance in my mind. Like, okay, I've been raised not to talk back, but I'm also talking back in a way. So I feel guilty because sometimes I feel like, am I a terrible child?
Am I being rude?
Am I being rude?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I can't even sleep well because I'm like, I shouldn't have said this to mom. But at the same time, I feel like it was necessary for me to communicate this to her because I don't find any other way. Like, how else can I say? Because I'm not sure about Asian parents, but sometimes they tend to make decisions on behalf of us. But I feel like, I want to have a say too, on certain things. Or I'm feeling this way. Like, I don't know, like my mom and the generation, I won't generalize her generation. Like, so it's like a similar pattern. Like, they think my generation and the upcoming generation is soft.
Yeah.
Like, because you guys are easily depressed, you guys are easily anxious, you guys are
not tough enough.
Right? Like, we had to hustle, we went through a lot, look at where we are now.
Yeah, and then they probably guess like you like, it's how you see the situation, it's how you deal with it. It's your own problem,
And then the whole comparison thing comes out. Like, look how I dealt with it, and then look how your generation are dealing with it. Gen Zs are soft, or millennials are can't really do it. So there's a lot of like this dissonance in my mind. So like, I've been brought up not to feel weak, not to feel that, not to feel this. So like, when I feel sad, I actually sort of hate myself because I'm like, I shouldn't be feeling sad.
Okay.
I should be pushing through this. I should be. There's no room to feel sad.
Have you ever thought like when you feel sad, you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm weak.
Oh, all the time.
You're
That's
right,
like there's like the voice in me, right?
Like you're weak.
You're weak.
You need to be stronger.
Oh, you're so soft. You should be strong. Why are you crying? This is nothing to cry over. Those are literally like the
haunting
voices.
you, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Then I will also tell myself like, no, you know what? I'm a geek. I watch a lot of movies, a lot of Marvel stuff. So like, I will pick up quotes here and there. Like, in order for you to enjoy victory, there will be downs. I don't know which superhero said that, but yeah. So I always tell myself things that I pick up here and there. It's okay. It's okay for you to be sad now. Just don't dwell in it. That kind of stuff.
I'm wondering if also generational trauma is different in the sense of Asian contexts and the Western side as well. I mean, these are all the questions that come to my mind. I think yours too when you did your research, right? About
my mom literally told me, you're watching too much Western movies. I am not a Western mom. She literally told me. She's like, I'm not that Western mom where the child can talk back and then the mom talks.
Wow.
But bless that woman, she's doing much better right now. I think she sort of has no choice but to adapt with me. I got a daughter who talks back. What can I do?
The challenges of parenting never ends.
So like, I think she's also learning right now to also alongside me as well. But like, circling back to this topic, it's like, so there's this, for me as a parent, you have like this, you want to like parent your child better and try not to pass on the trauma. I have this dissonance of like guilt and I want to break the cycle. But at the same time, a lot of times feelings like guilt, shame and all come into play. And that is why
we have somebody with us today.
Yeah.
So guys, let us introduce Shireen. Hi, Shireen.
Hi, great to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Did you enjoy our story time?
It was very informative. I think it's so interesting to see how you both have been through, same but different.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So just to share with everybody, Shireen's a clinical psychologist, also known as the Illuminated Psychologist on social media.
Check out on Instagram, guys.
And TikTok.
Yeah. But Instagram mainly, right?
Instagram mainly,
yes. Yeah. Okay.
Would you like to share a little bit more about yourself before we get started?
Sure. Thank you for the warm invite. So, yes, my name is Shireen Olikh. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I specialize more in inner child healing. And I find that it has a lot of breakthroughs when we are trying to do our own healing work in just transforming what we've been through and how can we navigate through that in adulthood. So if anyone's keen to know a little bit more about that, then a great place to check me out on would be Instagram at the Illuminated Psychologist.
Our inner childs are going to need a lot of healing today.
Yeah, I know, right?
And Shireen, we appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you so much.
Excited
we
to be
hope all
here.
the inner childs out there as well heal alongside with us throughout today's session.
Actually, the reason why we're doing the episode today on generational trauma is I think we find the very importance of being aware. To be aware of this. I think that's how healing starts. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
Yeah. So shall we jump into things?
Yes. Are you ready for the first question?
I'm ready. Let's dive into it.
Okay. All right. So first question for you, Shireen. When did the awareness of generational trauma actually start?
Yeah.
So I would say that when you become aware of what's happening in your life, right, you also start to ask, well, where did I learn this from? So when you have that ability to understand, perhaps you picked up certain traits from your parents or just family patterns. Okay, that's the first awareness that, hey, this is generational trauma. Now, a lot of times we might wonder, so does everyone have it? I hear this all the time in sessions. Clients are like, oh, but does this person have it? Does that person have it? It's a very Asian thing, I feel, always comparing to the other person. And I go, listen, let's just focus on you and what you're going through, right? Because I can't speak for everyone. But what I do know is that not everyone would have generational trauma, okay? But what we can probably say is, in every family, there may have been instances, maybe certain patterns, certain things that may pass on some sort of unhealthy traits. So if we can look at that in this generation, if we can bring our awareness to that, that's really how we end up healing, because we break out of that cycle.
I see. So like you mentioned, not everybody may have generational trauma. So how do you differentiate it in the first place?
What we really want to look at is, was there a traumatic event? Okay, so sometimes it could be one big traumatic event. Sometimes it could be consistent patterns of, let's say, abuse. But the main things would be if someone experienced or witnessed, let's say, neglect, abuse, or if they were close to someone who perhaps died by suicide, or maybe even in childhood, they may have had some experience with sexual assault. All of those would already pave the way for generational trauma.
I see. And how about like cases of like divorced parents and stuff? Would that be also possibly like a cause of generational trauma as well?
So I always hear this thing where people say, oh, we stayed together for the kids.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like they think that staying together for the kids is the better option. And here's the thing. If you worked on your issues, if you worked on creating a healthy environment for your kids, right? Great, then stay together. But if you stayed together and you just kept fighting, arguing in front of your kids, you guys have totally different parenting styles. That's all creating so much of confusion for the kids. So I'm not saying that divorce itself creates a form of generational trauma. It's actually what happened in the process. There are many cases of divorce where it was a very gentle divorce. And what I mean by that is they learned how to co-parent well. They didn't pull their children into their messes, right? Yeah, that's not going to pave the way for generational trauma.
Okay.
But if you created a situation where you used your kids to kind of pull this emotional blackmail cards and all of that, yes, then we are definitely creating a cycle of generational trauma.
Okay. And about Asian and Western context, would there be any difference in terms of that for generational trauma?
If I were to zoom into Asian context specifically, there's just so much emphasis on people's opinions. Like, how many of us grew up hearing, what would people say? What would people think?
I know, right?
And so if you look at that, right, I'd say it's a key difference, because a lot of times Westerners, they don't have that same aspect of, what are people going to say about me? What are they going to think? They're more independent. They're more focused on their bubble or their family unit, rather than saying other people and their opinions is what makes our family unit.
I see. Okay.
It's very, very interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting. Because part of how I gained the awareness of generational trauma, or like more like, hey, you can actually talk back to your parents. That was like a big awareness for me, that I grew up thinking I can never talk back to my parents. But when I started watching, American shows or TV, cartoons or movies, the coming of age films, a lot of them actually sort of, in a way, talk back to the parents, right? Like, hey, I don't like How are you making me feel? I don't like how this divorce is making me feel. You guys are a mess. You know, blah, blah, blah. They actually talk back, right? So, in a way, I also started practicing that. But it sort of did not work, because there's this, like, in the Asian context, it's like the act of talking back to your parents is seen as a sign of, like, disrespect.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen similar patterns like this, or like, why is that so?
It's how they were raised, right? I mean, case in point, let's say our parents' generation, they were raised in such a harsh way of do not ever speak back.
Yeah.
And so for them, that's the way it is. And so for them to then interact with their own kids, let's say our generation, and then to go, oh, you have an opinion and you're speaking back. So they perceive that as being extremely rude. But if you really think about it, this generation has just learned how to communicate better, right? Rather than saying, I cannot talk about what I want to talk about because it's going to upset you. They've learned, I need to voice out what I feel or what I'm thinking about this situation. And that's where you get the friction.
Yeah, that's when the friction. So, like, with that friction comes a lot of conflicting emotions, right? A lot of, as someone who was raised to always be the obedient child, and then now trying to learn, I would say unlearn some things that I have been, indoctrinated. Why do I keep using the word indoctrinated? Some of the things that I've been brought up with, right? So, I personally, and I think a lot of people out there can relate as well, about dealing with the feeling of, like, shame and feeling bad, guilt, because essentially what we're doing is we're communicating how we're feeling and what we need. But at the end of the day, at the expense of our parents' emotions and feelings, they get hurt. So are we the bad guys? Is what we're doing, like, a bad thing? Or
we're not the bad guys for having emotions, for having thoughts. And here's actually something to think about. Guilt and shame are two of the lowest emotions that humans can feel. It makes us feel horrible, low of the low. So when we constantly fall into a state of saying, I feel so guilty, I feel so shameful, and for what? For just voicing out what you feel, you are assigning a meaning to yourself. I am bad. I did something bad. No, you did not. You just used your voice. So do you notice there's already so much of friction with just using your voice, with being seen? And then that's where that guilt and shame comes in, which is passed on from the generation before us, because they were not allowed and they were not encouraged to use their voice in the way that we use it, or to be seen in the way that we are now, being seen.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I'm like processing everything.
Everything's just
so right. When we're dealing with this kind of feeling of shame and quote unquote guilt, how can I come to terms with it? Like, it is what it is, like this kind of thing, without putting myself down.
The first thing I would encourage is connect with your inner child. Meaning, connect with that version of you that's, let's say, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Under the ages of 8. And think about a time when that version was probably told, do not speak back to me. Okay? And then you are going to connect with that version, and you're going to say it differently. You're going to play the role of either a mother or a father, and you're going to enter that scene knowing that this child wants to say something, and you're going to sit and you're going to listen and you're going to say, you know what? Your voice is important. Tell me what's on your mind. Do you see that difference? You address what happened in the past. You're not saying it didn't happen, but you are recognizing that there's some sort of unmet need. So because that was never met, because you were never given the permission to use your voice or to be seen, that's why the guilt and shame comes up. Because essentially, you're trying to live your life now based on a program that doesn't fit what you were taught.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, we can practice that and whatever not, but the environment around us is also very important. So how do we, I mean, it's hard to control at the same time what other people think or how do they want to think about things. But how do we go about that? Because if you're gonna have your mom going like, yes, auntie, stop, speaking back at me and stuff like
honestly,
that.
it's still like an ongoing thing because we cannot expect a human who's been
Correct.
used to a particular style to just
Correct.
change overnight, right?
Correct.
So
Yes.
my mom and I, we do communicate way better now. She's brilliant right now. She actually listens. She respects the concept of mental health. But if you were to go back 10 years back, she'd be like, I don't believe in depression. I don't believe in anxiety. Yeah, she was that kind of woman because she hustled all her life. She did not have the time to to actually be down because growing through a period of hardship, you do not have time to. At least for her, what she told me was she did not have the time to process her emotions. She's like go because she had to raise her kids. If she was down, how is she going to raise her kids?
It was
right?
survival mode.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was no time to process emotions because she had to hold down everything.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's what gets passed on. It's like emotions, mental health, as you were saying, the older generation views it as a form of weakness because they did not have the space to slow down. For them, slowing down meant everything's going to crash and burn.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when right now, so a huge turning point was when my mom, right now she's like, okay, if you're feeling sad, okay, go out and treat yourself. When she said that, I'm like, wow, okay, that was a huge change because back then she'd be like, suck it up. You know?
You're like, who's this new mom?
Yeah.
That's new mom. That's my mom. But yeah, so I'm thinking she's also like one thing that I had to understand was she is also learning as a parent. She is a first time parent, right? And right at this she gave birth to twins, my sister and I. So double
Trouble.
trouble. So not only is she learning to be a parent, now she needs to learn how to be a parent for two people.
Yes.
Which is different personalities, different
Exactly.
needs, yes.
Correct.
Exactly. My
Correct.
sister is the type very introverted, right? I'm at least for talk back. So she's a first time parent. I'm also learning. So yeah. So right now that's the like right now she's like super aware and all of that. But that being said, right, it's not like an overnight shift. She'll go back to her old roots again every now and then.
Yes.
Like if she see me sad 5 days in a row, she expects me to be sad like 2 days.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress, right? I
Yeah.
mean, before this she'll be like, don't be sad. But now 2 days sad. Okay.
Okay.
But if she sees me 5 days sad, she'll be like, what's your problem?
Yeah. I'm glad to know that your mom's,
Yeah.
working on that too.
Then she'll be like, what's your problem? That kind of stuff lah. So like, it's what I'm trying to say is basically they're also growing, but it's not like an overnight kind of shift.
Yeah, but there's also some people who may be who will stand by what they think is right and go like no, that's crap. I don't believe in this. There's no such thing as generational trauma. Maybe there may be some people like that as
And
well.
I've met people who don't believe in therapy.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
Nowadays
so,
younger generations always simply want to go to therapy.
and spend so
Little
much
sad.
of money, and
Serious.
Yeah,
Little sad. I want to go for mental health checkup.
Yeah.
I'm depressed. I'm
Yeah,
like this.
yeah,
There's
they-
still people like that.
a lot. Yeah, I think which is why the
Nowadays.
taboo is still around.
Yep.
Yeah, but how do we tackle or how do we manage when we come across situations like that where here you are trying to work on yourself and then you bump into or you may live with somebody who has that perception of this. So how do you go about it?
Okay, great question. I'd say you need to ask how important that person is in your life. Because, example, if you live with them, we need to address it more frequently, right?
Yeah,
but
correct.
let's say it's a friend or an auntie, someone you bump into here and there. You don't necessarily need to put in all your attention and effort because they are a once in a while kind of bump in. But for the person that you're living with, you really need to set your boundary. Meaning, let's say if you're parenting, right? You have to say, this is how I'm doing it. I understand that you would have done it differently, but this is how I'm doing it. And then you could just share the importance of why you're doing it in a certain way. And if they're still going, oh no, mental health, oh, I don't believe in all that. You could say, okay, I understand you don't believe in it, but this is what I believe in. This is what I'm trying to instill here. So again, the boundaries, that conversation, it needs to be had frequently, because if not, you're going to see a little bit of progress and then back to the old ways.
Yeah. and that's the thing, to be honest, as a parent, I mean, we're setting all these boundaries here,
Yes.
but it haunts you, like what people say, or the comments that they make about you as a parent. Honestly, for me as a mom, it haunts me. Like, when I go to bed, when I tuck the kids in at night, and I'm by myself on my phone, and then, all their voices just come in and go like, they just say all those things.
Have you?
And
Has there been any comment that stand out for you that you're comfortable with sharing?
There's been a lot. I mean, because as a parent, you do you, right?
Yes.
And then there are parents who do not agree, or the older generation who do not agree with what you're doing, and they go like, no, like, you're pretty much what they're telling you is you're wrong. But in your heart, that's what you want to do, and it's right.
Yes.
But yet, even though it's right, that's what you want to do, but it still does come back to you. Their voice just mess up with you in your head sometimes. You get what I mean?
Because that's how they did it, right? They're
Yeah,
trying to teach you how
correct.
they did it.
Correct,
But
correct.
the thing is, back then, again, they were not talking about so many things as we are now. Like just
Correct.
mental health, one example.
Correct.
Back then, no, they were not talking about this. So I always like to think about it as, listen, we have all this new knowledge and information. Why would we do it the same way? We can do it better now.
Yep, exactly right. So the famous phrase will be, back in my days.
Yes.
Right?
If I had a ringgit for every time I went back.
You could buy a house by now.
Not a house, but maybe a second-hand car.
A second-hand car, okay, that works. Yeah.
It's just interesting because if you look at research, okay, back in the day, come on, it was so normal in that generation for like physical punishment, the caning, the rota, and all that stuff. There's research that shows children that go through physical punishment, as they age, they're actually more at risk to develop mental health disorders. So knowing that, if you are a parent now, why would you put your child at risk for that?
Correct.
So again, it was considered norm back then.
Correct.
Probably they were doing it. They were raised in that way. Their friends were doing it. But when you have new information, you want to take that and do it better. You want to give your kids the best.
Yeah, correct. I mean, I've had comments, like, back in my days, I used to get the frying pan.
Yep, I used to
Something like
get the pot. Pots and pans will just
Pots
come
and
flying at
pans,
me.
yeah,
What
yeah.
else? Oh, my mom. It's almost like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
It was so
you're right.
normalized
You're
in
right.
their
Badge of honor.
time.
They're so
Yeah.
proud that they've been hit by all these things.
Yeah.
Yes.
What are you proud about?
Because you see, for them, that's their norm.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to do it differently now, you must understand that you're kind of pushing against their norm for them to pause and go, oh, you mean what I went through was bad? And that's tough for that awareness to go, I was abused. There are still so many people. I got beaten when I was a child. I got abused. It was abuse. Because when I think about a 5-year-old kid, I'm like, no, I wouldn't be hitting you.
Yep.
And so a lot of times when people hear that term abuse, they go, no, I wasn't abused. I'm like, but you got slapped frequently and you got caned frequently. That is abuse. It's very hard for them to grasp that. And then that is why when they have their own kids, they go, well, I was brought up very strict and I turned out fine, so I'm going to do the
Correct.
same. That is the start of that generational trauma being passed.
I
Oh no,
see.
that's not a good sign. You know why?
Why?
Because there is this thing that I witness. I like just off and on here and there when I mingle with people who are parents, right? Especially a little bit older grandpas, right?
Right.
They will be like they will see their kids raising their their grandchildren, and their grandchildren don't get caning or don't get anything. It's more like go sit in the corner and think about what you did. I'm just paraphrasing here, but it's more like that kind of punishment. So the grandparents will be like, there should be caning, there should be
Yeah.
slap, there should be a proper disciplinary method. That's why. And then if the kids were to throw a tantrum or cry out, they'll be like, see, if you don't hit your kid, this is what happens.
Oh.
I have witnessed like this kind of
Yeah.
problematic narratives these days as well, because they witness how we, like your generation, are raising the kids, and they
Yeah.
may not agree, and then there's this kind of narrative that's like going on.
It's because of what they went through,
Yeah.
which is their own trauma. And if you notice, that's passing it on. Because what I would say is, if you were raised and you witnessed that, right? Like you witness forms of abuse, how that trauma gets passed on is if you don't label it as abuse. And then you go, this is normal. Let me do that with my own kids. That's you passing on this box of trauma. But if you pause and you go, actually, there must be a better way to do it that doesn't involve harming this child.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's you bringing awareness to the issue. You are finding a way to work through it and to do it differently. And if you notice, then you're not passing on a box of trauma. You are passing on healthier coping skills. Just like how you mentioned, with your dad.
Yeah.
He does it so differently. He's very active with the grandkids and all of that.
Yeah.
So whatever he went through in his childhood, he's probably recognized, oh, well, let's not do that to the next generation and the next.
Correct. Correct. So it's a matter of awareness.
Yeah,
It's like starts with
and
that.
like a stark difference. So Edeline and I, we've been working for like a really long time, right? So sometimes during our phone calls and video calls, her kids would come through and I'll be like, hi, hello. And like as time goes, I observe the way that she communicates with her kids. It's so refreshing. It's honestly refreshing, and also like my world flipped upside down in a way, because I'll be like, Edeline, you talk to your child like this? It's so validating. Because for me, I was not used to the way, I didn't even know this is how parents should be speaking to their kids. I say I'm trauma dumping now. but that is honestly refreshing, because it's like a day and night sort of difference.
Yes.
I was growing up, I was in like, hey, how are you feeling? You want to cry? Okay, go and cry. Nobody told me.
yeah.
So
I
to
get
see
you.
Adeline doing that, it's honestly very, very refreshing.
I think it was a choice I made as well, honestly, as a parent, because like I was telling Yasanthi when we were doing our homework about this topic as well, like for me to express something, it takes a long time. Like when I feel something like anger or when I feel upset, I'm so used to just scooping it up within me and just doing my own thing. You get what I mean? Like to deal with it within myself. So the minute I get angry, usually the next thing I do is just keep quiet. So my husband knows that. He knows when I'm angry, it's not just because I'm quiet, it's because of my footsteps. Like, it's a certain way, I
Heavy
guess.
steps.
Yeah, I think so. And then he knows, like, okay, she's angry.
Yeah.
So but that's the mode that I go into. So I realized along the way that that's definitely not healthy, because you definitely struggle a lot with expressing yourself and all these things that even for my husband to, when he asked me what is wrong, it's not easy for me to go like, okay, actually, so this is what happened. You know?
That's such an interesting example, because if I were to think about it, you mentioned your mom when your son was crying, she would say, shh. So there's already a sense of like, oh, emotions,
Correct.
push it down. Your voice, let's not be heard too loudly.
Correct. Yeah, you're right, Shireen. So that's what I really felt like, and I realized that it was a struggle trying to feel, to acknowledge anger, stuff like that. It was easier always to push it aside and go and do other things, head out to the mall or whatever not, it's so much easier than to acknowledge the fact that I'm angry. So with my kids, when I see that they're angry, so it's like a conscious decision that I made, like, okay, he's angry now, and I don't want him to bottle up his feelings as well.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, you know what? You can cry. It's okay to cry, even though there's a war happening inside of me.
Yes.
Because for me itself, the feeling, I mean, him
We
feeling
weren't given a
everything,
space to
allowing
cry.
it, expressing it, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much happening in front of me at the moment. Him crying, him wailing, mommy, no, I don't want this, mommy, no, and those kind of things is so overstimulating at the same time.
But what you're describing right now, that is literally observing the past trauma and breaking out of it. Because do you, like, we're talking about breaking these generational trauma, right? Cycle breakers, as they call it.
Yeah.
It's that. You need to observe it. And it's not going to be a bed of roses. You're going to feel a lot of conflicting emotions happening within. As you mentioned, when your kids might be crying, there's like, But then you go, I'm going to do it differently.
Correct.
And because you're doing it differently, they're not going to have that sense of, oh, if I'm angry, I can't talk about it. There's a way to do it in a healthy way, and they're given the room for it.
Yeah.
Great job.
Well, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yay.
Good job. I'm just looking at you like verbalizing your emotions and your thoughts so well, and I'm like, you're so eloquent.
They've taught me a lot, actually. Like, my kids have taught me a lot, especially when it's got to do with my emotions. It taught me a lot, and like books and everything, all these tools that really help, because for me to express emotions is so difficult. So I had to use tools like books and stuff to also help them, and at the same time it's teaching me.
It's like you're healing yourself, and while you're healing yourself, you're also healing the next generation.
Correct. Wow.
Yay.
Yay.
So do I need to become a parent to heal my inner child?
You don't need to become a parent to heal your inner child. You can just start connecting with your inner child. Meaning, think about those experiences that you mentioned when you would have some sort of opinions. The first thing that you were told was, don't talk back, right? There's already a sense of guilt, as you mentioned, like using your voice to highlight what you feel, what you think, and then the next thing that's going to happen is guilt. So you can just connect with that inner child and to let her know, hey, it's totally fine to have opinions and you're allowed to have them. And then your inner child's going to say, no, but I was told that I'm not supposed to. And then you say, well, that was their generation. That's how they did things. And I'm letting you know that I give you permission to be you, to use your voice, to be seen, to be heard. And the more that you do that with your inner child, you are going to change something in your subconscious mind, because now the subconscious mind, when you use your voice, is saying, why did you do that? So we need that subconscious mind to go, it's perfectly fine to use your voice.
It's like is it like an ongoing thing, or can I just do it once and then boom, I'm set for life?
It is ongoing.
Oh, no.
It's sort of like this. Imagine if you just go to the gym one time.
No, that's not going to help.
No, you just cook one healthy meal. No, it is part of your lifestyle. The same way how we wake up in the morning, we brush our teeth. Every day there has to be some effort for our mental health. Be it just connecting with your inner child and saying, I see you, I hear you. Even that's good enough to start with. And when you notice some sort of blocks coming up in your life, especially things to do with guilt and shame, really ask yourself, where did this come from? Because it's not starting from this present moment. It must have started from childhood.
Wow.
Why is our childhood such a critical period, and why are we so impressionable during those ages?
That's where we learn everything about who we are, what's acceptable, what society sees as good or bad, and who are we learning from? Our environment. That's why if we were just to compare, right, and we don't need to go too far, let's just compare Malaysia and Singapore. We do things very differently. Whenever I go to Singapore, I'm like, wow, everything's so clean and organized. It's a little different if I look at how things are done here. It's just how we grew up. This is considered the norm here. But if we just go across the border to Singapore, it's not the norm there. So if you notice, environment plays a huge part. So now if we grew up in a family where our parents have not done the work, right? And then they tend to pass that on to us. So it could be a sense of, hey, don't make too much noise because we don't want people to hear. Or it could be, oh, you're going out like that, at this time. All of that is something that then we think is the norm, and we start to live our lives from that lens. So I would say when we want to heal, we need to go back to our childhood, because everything that we believe about ourselves, about the world, it's formed in our childhood.
Wow. As a parent, I suddenly feel the weight. But really, I do worry, like even for me, I check and balance almost every day or as often as I can. Like, am I doing it right? The thing is, there's no such thing as right. You know what I mean? I mean, that's wrong, of course. So you got to draw the line, no abuse and stuff. But then at the same time, you wonder, you cannot be perfect. Having to aim to be perfect is also going to be very stressful. So it's
forget
right?
about perfection, because
Yeah.
perfection itself is a trauma response.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Is
What?
it?
Yes, because what is perfection saying? I need it to be the best of the best of the best, perfect. Because then I know I'm good enough. And if I'm good enough, then people will like me. So when we say, and I hear it all the time, people say, I'm a perfectionist. And my psychologist brain is like, you have unprocessed trauma. But okay. Sorry to call anyone out, but
It's okay.
yes. And also, if you look at that, when we strive to be perfect, we are putting too much focus on not getting it right.
Yeah.
Because we're saying that, oh, what I'm doing now isn't good enough. So in that sense, we become our blocks. We become our biggest bullies. I always just say, just get started. Just start doing something. I mean, obviously, don't do it with no readings or no information, but just start. Because when you start, you're going to learn along the way. You're going to implement new things. And then you get better and better and better. But why put that pressure of, I need to know it all amazingly right now?
Yeah, you're right. And there's also a fear, like say if, of course, there are times where I let my emotions let loose as well. I mean, I cannot handle it, and I start screaming, or stuff like that. And like you said, a child's childhood or a person's childhood is the most crucial period of their life. In a way, you really, it's considered that. And I'm just wondering, like, can you tackle it? For example, if for me as a parent, I realize, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have shouted at my child. What can I do to help them heal so that it doesn't, build up or, turn into something worse?
Okay, great question. So I'd say two parts here. First part is you already have that awareness, right? It's like, oh, I shouldn't have yelled at them. But if that awareness makes you feel guilty, it's not the most helpful, because then you feel bad. We don't want you to feel bad.
Correct.
Because when you're feeling bad, then you're operating from a place of, I am bad. We want to operate from a place of, we're all learning. We all have the capacity to grow at any stage of our lives, right?
I see.
So when you look at that and you go, okay, I shouldn't have yelled. First thing, what were your triggers? Okay, so example, for me, I know that if I'm hungry, I'm going to snap. I get hangry.
Hangry,
Yes.
okay.
And it's happened a couple of times. And then after that, I go, oh my gosh, why did I snap? All I needed was food. So now I know if I'm hungry, I'm going to get triggered, go eat first, then deal with the situation. So in your case, you just want to ask yourself, okay, but what were the triggers? Maybe sometimes it could be there were 5 things happening at once and everything was not going according to plan.
Yeah, usually most of the time that.
Okay. So if it's that, then what you need to do in that moment is to identify everything's not going according to plan right now. Throw the plan out, because the more that you try to hold on to the plan, it's not going according to plan, right? You're getting more irritated. So
Yeah,
you need
correct.
to ground yourself first and to go, okay, everything's not going according to plan and I feel overwhelmed. You see, you got to parent yourself first. Your inner child is kind of sitting there going, the plan, guys, the plan.
Yeah.
So you parent your inner child first, okay? After that, then you tend to, now part 2, you're saying, how do I kind of make sure that those experiences do not have, let's say, negative effects on the kids?
Yeah.
So you could have a talk with them later on. You could say, listen, how did you feel when you heard or when you saw mommy, XYZ? And then give them that space to talk. And I think something that's so important is to offer them sometimes the sorry. To say, okay, I hear you. It made you feel a little overwhelmed or sad or scared. Mommy, sorry. And how about this? In the future, mommy promises to do it differently. And so you see, it's not blaming them, right? It's not saying, well, because you lost your shoe and we had to go. It's like understanding their world too. And you guys are just working together. Teamwork makes the dream work.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Wow, I never saw it that way, in the sense of 2 parts of it.
I have a question from from the word sorry, right? So like again, growing up, we were taught sorry goes one way,
Yes.
not 2 way. Remember?
Yeah.
Like I'm sure your dad did fantastic, since you said your dad was very communicative and whatnot, right? But from my growing up experience, sorry was one way. Sorry was in 2 way. So why is that so? Like, is it bad for parents to say sorry, or why is it not cultivated?
It's not a bad thing for them to say sorry. I'd say it's a very good practice, because as a parent especially, if you're teaching your child that they're always in the wrong, that the other person, let's say in that situation, that the parent wasn't at fault, then the child is going to learn to take the blame for everything. So when they become adults, okay, let's just say people pleasers, it's because they want to make everyone happy. They always take the blame, even if it's not their fault. Could have also stemmed from an environment where they were always told that they had to apologize, but they were never offered an apology when maybe they were not to blame.
Yeah, there you go.
So, parents listening out, they need to practice to say sorry as well.
Yes, because think about it this way, right? We are adults. And if sometimes we cannot regulate our own emotions, isn't it kind of crazy to say that we expect this little kid who is just learning about the world and emotions and sensations. Sometimes our socks feel funny and that might irritate us. The kids are learning all of this for the first time. So when we have this expectation like, oh, you should just know, we as adults, we also don't do the best at times to regulate ourselves. How can we put that expectation on the kids?
Very well said.
That hits me hard too. Okay, let's take a break.